A good morning to you, and as they say in my ancestry, top of the morning to you. Happy St. Patrick's Day, Jeremy.
Sláinte, nice to meet you. Nice to be back.
I've already had phone calls from my family. Obviously, patron saint is Patrick. I've said often on this podcast, and it's probably not a good thing to say because often your mother's maiden name is part of your security for the internet. But my mother's maiden name is Mulligan, so I literally could have been Paddy Mulligan. My family calls me Paddy. It's my day. One of my sisters has already phoned me and said, "Happy your day." It's a bit of a thing in my family.
It's a bit of a thing in my family too. My dad's from Belfast, so we spent quite a lot of time in Northern Ireland growing up. So yeah, it's one of the few. It's one of the few kind of national holidays that I was going to say take seriously, but I'll pop out. I'll have a quiet Guinness this afternoon somewhere, and
Nice.
I'll call my sister. That sort of used to be our traditional thing, but she's in Melbourne now, so we're not getting together today. But yeah, no, we've got a bit of a family history with it as well.
Have you seen Belfast, the movie?
I haven't. No, I've heard very good things about it. Yeah.
Not to put a wedge between you and I, Jeremy, after our years of knowing each other, but your family, were they wearing orange or were they wearing green? Like, where were they sitting?
Well, they were Protestant, but
we're done.
Yeah,
we're done.
no,
Don't
they were
anymore.
but but certainly not orange Protestant. They weren't bright orange. Yeah, they were Protestant
movie,
by religion rather than politics.
Belfast is really, really good. I mean, I cried because I can hear my great aunts. So my mum's parents came straight out of Belfast. My mum's mum grew up on the Falls Road, which was literally the center of the Troubles. My mum's dad was from a village called Rosslea. So it's a huge part of my upbringing. I cried in the movie at a couple of things because I could hear my elderly relatives, talking about the devil. The dark side of the moon is where the devil stores his shillelagh, knowing exactly what they're talking about. And yes, so even talking about it now, I can kind of feel like there is those. It's funny how deep your ancestry can still affect you, even if it's not part of your day-to-day life. But it's like when not to belittle it. It's like I've got a dog who's a border collie. I can see my dog having the skill set to herd sheep when the dog's never seen a sheep. It's just in there. And I feel the same about being Irish. I'm like an Irish bitch, basically what I'm saying.
Well, the other thing about it is it's such recent history. I mean, I think the fact that they're making historical movies about it is odd to me because I was there just either side of the Good Friday Agreement. I was there just before, and then I was there for a cousin's wedding straight afterwards. And I remember very vividly walking through downtown Belfast with my cousin, and she just stopped dead in the street. This is about a week after the Good Friday Agreement in 93, and I couldn't work out what she was staring at. She was staring at a police officer because in her entire life she'd never seen a cop in regular uniform, not wearing a flak jacket and a helmet.
Wow.
Or it's certainly not wearing body armor, and they absolutely de-escalated, partially as a show of support and peace. But that was astonishing to me. I mean, she'd never seen a police officer not heavily armed and armored. So I mean, and that's only that's less than 20 years ago.
I feel like I don't want to bring the whole thing down now, but I made a heading for today's show that talked about Omicron modeling, abortion clinic protests, and cultural appropriation. It sounds like the most depressing show we're ever going to do. But the cultural appropriation is more, I guess, kind of a philosophical conversation we're going to have shortly. And it's about St. Paddy's Day and about how cultural appropriation is not acceptable today. Fine, we're on board with that. Unless you want to dress in green and get drunk on St. Patrick's Day. So we'll talk about that a bit later on and see what's going on. We might talk about the garbage person of the week as well if we get time. But look, let's start we wanted to talk about Omicron and COVID with someone who has looked at the numbers. Kate Newton is a senior data journalist for stuff.co.nz. And if I can find my freaking mouse, there it is. Kate joins us right now to have a chat about a recent article that she's just written. Kate, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Kia ora. Thanks for having me.
And happy St. Patrick's Day to you.
Thank you. And to you as well. I've come from deep, deep Scots ancestry. So all the celebrations to you too.
Everyone's allowed to be
a lot of crossover there.
Yeah.
Hey, we were looking to have a chat, and I talking to you last night. We were very clear that you are a journalist and you look at numbers. That's what you do. But we were wanting to have a look, and I was thinking about this yesterday, that the modeling that we got previously to what was going to happen with Omicron, and what you look at around the world with kind of a 4-week rise and peak, we seem to be on the extreme end of what the modeling said. So I have questions around why that is. You may not have the answers to that, but what you do have is answers to perhaps what the numbers actually are and what they are today and what they're showing us. So the article, COVID-19, the places where Omicron outbreak is just getting started, of course, is terrifying to many people because we're like, I thought it was just finishing, and we thought it's just getting started. Why don't I just throw the ball to you and say, what can you tell us about the Omicron numbers at the moment and what's happening with those numbers around the country?
Sure. So, I mean, I think I point out quite high up in that article, and I should say this is sort of a weekly series that we've been doing since August last year, a very long time now. I'm sick of it, but as is everyone else. This was our weekly Wednesday update that we do when the weekly vaccination data comes out, and we just kind of wrap some other bits and pieces in there as well. And we were looking at where it's kind of peaking and starting to rise around the country. And there's this idea that there are so many cases. I mean, I think we sort of get about 20,000 cases a day at the moment, and hospital numbers are still rising, that it must be rampant everywhere in the country. But in actual fact, the vast majority of those cases have been in Auckland, and within that have been in Counties Manukau DHB, so taking in South Auckland and then South Auckland, so places like, Drury, just the side of the Bombays. So yeah, I mean, if you look at that, you can see that Counties Manukau has kind of peaked already. Pat's just sort of mousing over those numbers, but the active case numbers are starting to drop off, and this chart shows it's normalized by population. So this is the percentage of each DHB's population that is an active case. So the dark
is. I feel like asking you, I think about that graph that we've all seen and it being like a bell curve. I'm thinking about this like it's almost like a vertical bell curve. If I was looking down, if you were to take it and flip it that way, the dark part would be the peak. Is that what we're looking at?
Sort of, yeah. So the dark part is the peak, and it is actually a bell curve if you read left to right for each of those DHBs. So you can see that Counties Manukau's bell curve is that dark area. And then if you look kind of maybe just towards the top, you can see that Auckland had a peak around the same time. So that's Auckland DHB, the sort of Auckland City DHB.
Yep.
But to a lesser extent, fewer cases per population in Auckland, but similar kind of timing to Counties Manukau. And then if you have a look down at, say, Tairawhiti, which is Gisborne and East Cape, you can see that is starting to ramp up now. We're getting into that darker zone. And similarly, I think Hutt Valley is another area where you can see that the case numbers are starting to rise. Capital and Coast, that's Wellington.
There's also a really interesting angle of this is the perception as well. University started here in Dunedin, so I'm in Dunedin, Jeremy's in Auckland. University started here in Dunedin, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we all got the reports that there was parties, police having to break up parties of 300 people. What I would have expected to see in Southern is actually a massive dark bit at the start because, we had queues for hours of people to get in, which I'm sure we're around the country, but does it break it down? Have you broken it down further than Southern? Like, could I find out what's happened in Dunedin, for example?
No,
or
this is as detailed as it gets in the Ministry of Health data. Yeah, unfortunately. So we can't look at it in any more detail like that to see what's happened in Dunedin or even North Dunedin versus, in Cargill or Gore or wherever.
I noticed that
yeah,
you're
I mean, it
inside the
does.
student district by saying North Dunedin, so that was nice. I got that. Got that local knowledge.
I studied in Dunedin for 4 years, so I'm well acquainted with that part of town. Um, yeah, so I mean, I guess the overall message from this is that you're not going to get one huge Omicron peak around the country simultaneously. It's going to spread, and that makes sense. You get people travelling out of Auckland around the country, as you point out. A whole bunch of students have travelled from who knows where around the country to Dunedin and maybe taken Omicron with them. And so you are going to get this ebb and flow of case numbers that will mean that the Omicron outbreak lasts a lot longer than just what's happening in Auckland.
If we move down off, this is the active cases as a percent of population. The next graph you've got is new confirmed cases as percent of population. Do the peaks and the obviously higher numbers match? Because this looks like a similar, for counties Manukau, this looks like a similar area of darkness. Do they relate to each other, or is there like
Yeah.
a 1 week offset, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it's a bit of an offset. Like this chart is almost a predictor of what will happen in the orange chart at the top. You can see that
Right.
counties Manukau new cases peak sort of happens maybe just before the peak in active cases, and that makes sense, right? Because the
Yeah.
active cases is sort of all of the people at once who have COVID, whereas this is just people who are newly diagnosed on the day. So you're going to get a bit of a peak flowing from one chart through to the next. So that's why we're saying this particular chart is maybe an indicator of where the next big peaks are going to be, and you can already see that starting to happen in Tairāwhiti. Maybe Hawke's Bay is just at the cusp of starting to get a bit of a peak, although we only have a few days of data there where it's really darkening up. But yeah, we just created these as a way to show, hey, this is what's happening in each area, and it's very different at the moment depending on where you are in the country.
Kate, I know your specialty is data and journalism rather than epidemiology, but I mean, you've been following this a long time. Does this signal, is this something that might signal, I mean, there's been talk about us having a second wave when people, including myself, I've essentially been self-isolating in Auckland, not because I haven't had a positive test. I've just been avoiding certain places. I live with someone with a compromised immune system, and I'm just being very, very careful. So there is talk about that when people like us start coming out back into the world, that we're in danger of having a second wave. I mean, do you think that the data backs that up?
I mean, it's difficult to say at the moment. I mean, I suppose the first place where that second wave is going to be most noticeable is in Auckland, in the Auckland region, because you've seen that first wave happen already, and that's already starting to die down. So maybe people are starting to think, hey, it's okay to, leave my house if they've been doing what you've been doing. And obviously I'm working from home as well. Despite my best efforts to get Omicron. Not that I'm actively trying to get it, but I'm very surprised I haven't already. But yeah, this is something that's been talked about a lot, and we spoke with there's one of the COVID modelers that we talk to a lot at Stuff is a guy called Tony Blakely. He's a New Zealander. He actually works out of the University in Melbourne, and he's done a lot of modelling for the state of Victoria over there. But he keeps a really close eye on what's happening in New Zealand. And I talked to him not that long ago about this idea that you can either let it rip, is the phrase, and kind of just get it over with, or you attempt to actively kind of lower that peak. And the quid pro quo is that with a higher peak, you get through the wave a lot faster. A lower peak takes it's a longer time frame. It sort of spreads it out. So you end up with really similar case numbers overall, but you're just spreading it out a little bit longer. And the benefit of doing that is not so much to keep the number of total cases down, because it's going to end up being really similar in both models, but you protect essential services, you protect your hospitals, you protect your supply chains, because you don't have as many people in hospital at once. You don't have as many workers taken out of those critical services. So that's the argument in favour of that longer wave. But the counterpoint to that is that there is this potential for a second wave, that you kind of keep that peak low, but then all of these people who have been shielding of their own volition come out, and it takes off again. So, I mean, it's very possible that we could go that way.
Personally, I think that's a very fair trade-off. We've heard the stories of overseas, and I think you don't have to look very deep to realize how close we could possibly come to overwhelming our health system. So, if it takes a little bit longer, then and we don't crash our hospital system, that's a net positive in my view. But yeah, it's interesting to compare it to Victoria in particular. Yeah, I think they've had an interesting ride with it as well.
Yeah. I think the other really important thing to note is that whichever scenario you choose to pursue through public health measures, whether you just kind of let it take its course or you do actually try to suppress those case numbers a little bit, that all through it you are protecting your vulnerable populations. So elderly in particular, and New Zealand has done a really, really good job, and I think this has been picked up on internationally, of boosting its elderly population. I think we were nearly, when I looked at it yesterday, it was 88.5% of people aged over 65 have had a booster dose, which is like just incredible globally. Yeah.
You break down the data. I'm just looking over there because I think there might have been some data on ages for boosters, but we'll leave that for a sec. You look at the data. Do you yourself or then someone else within stuff go on to look at why the data is saying this? And let me preface this by saying, before the Omicron spike came, we had models and predictions and that sort of thing. We seem to be at the top end of those models and predictions, if not beyond them. And we looked for an epidemiologist to come on today to talk to why that was. I got a hold of Susie Wiles, and Susie Wiles was unfortunately busy at the moment, but she said this to me on the text, and she said I could share this as her thought. She says, so when to the question of why are we at the top end of the modeling, Susie says, my guess is the models weren't anticipating a super spreader protest outside Parliament and Omicron coming in two flavors, one of which is even more infectious than the other. So this idea about having a longer period of time or a second splurge, a second wave, is also potentially because of BA2. So the rest of the world got BA1, came down from it, and maybe they're getting a bit of a peak now with BA2, but we're getting BA1 and BA2 at the same time. So that might be part of the reason it spreads out. My thoughts. But with your data diving, is there any then construction and movement onto why are the numbers saying this?
No. So I wouldn't say that we've gone that far into it. With this update, we tend just to present the numbers as they are without trying to do too much editorializing or guessing as to why they're showing what they're showing. There was some comment that I made within the story looking at what had happened to booster doses in the last few weeks, which have really started to kind of flatten off. And that, I would say a fairly safe guess is because we are in the middle of a COVID wave. There are a bunch of people who actually just can't go get a booster right now because either they've got COVID, so that takes them out of contention, or they're isolating. There's a little bit of, I guess, we try to, within reason, come up with suggestions as to why the numbers are showing what they are, but I couldn't talk to, say, the effect of the Wellington protest on case numbers in Wellington, for example. Like there's without really comprehensive genomic sequencing, that kind of information, which we don't have access to, you wouldn't really be able to sheet it home to one thing or another.
Yeah. Well, Susie's given us the name of someone else that we're going to approach, maybe talk to that tomorrow. Hey, it's been a great pleasure having you on. Thank you very much for coming and joining us.
No problem.
And even, I think the numbers are so interesting to delve into. I'm currently isolating at home because I've got a housemate who came home with COVID. So I'm one of those people who I am boosted, but if I needed a booster, couldn't go and get one. So it echoes your thoughts. We're losing, Jeremy's co-hosting with me today, but some of our co-hosts can't come on because they've got workmates who are isolating and they have to go in and do their jobs on their days off. So it is everywhere and it's rampant. And what I take often solace in is the numbers, because then I can play the odds game as someone who loves poker and go, statistically, what does this mean? And that's actually been one of the driving factors for the decisions we've been making, and the decisions we've been making have probably been more cautious, much like Jeremy perhaps, than a lot of people in the country, but that's what we've decided to do. So I really appreciate your numbers and I appreciate you coming on today.
No problem. Thanks for your time.
I appreciate the numbers because they don't deny it's happening. I like that.
Yeah. Thanks, Kate. Appreciate you dudes and dudettes over at Stuff there. Thanks very much.
Cool. Cheers, guys.
All right. Yeah, I think that point you just made perfectly. It's happening. I mean, the reason we have COVID in this house, well, I have to say it's not in here right now. I'm doing my first rat test today. The first
Right.
one that first time I've ever had anything up my nose. I was quite proud, not proud like to a point of denying wanting to do it, that I've got this far in this thing without having anything rammed up my nose because of the precautions we're taking, but because of someone else's decision making, we are isolating, and I've got to do my first one today. Today is day 3, I think, officially.
Right.
No symptoms, although I'm a little bit of a hypochondriac. It's like I've got kids who are at intermediate school, and when you hear there's nits going around, you start doing this straight away. So as soon as I start saying I've got no COVID symptoms, I go, oh, but my throat's, there's this little something. So we'll see.
Well, good luck. Yeah, no. Touch wood. I've avoided it too. Although I certainly haven't avoided the swabs. I've had several of those over the months.
Really?
Various people I work for, particularly in the screen industry, have been, I think, have been really vigilant. You basically can't turn up on a TV or film set at the moment without having a compulsory test, which I think is great. I think because you talk about a super spreader event, if you have, literally even a basic TV show will have 100 people on set, and one of them gets sick, that's another week's worth of cases into the community. So I think caution is not something to be laughed at.
Yeah, and Susie's given us the name of someone to talk to about the modeling. We'll try and get them maybe for tomorrow. And the thing is, now I'm not giving out medical advice, but there was a report. There was an article on. There was an article on TVNZ Monday week ago. It's on YouTube if people want to look it up. And it said that with the rat tests, if you're fully boosted or if you're fully vaccinated, you test positive when you're infectious. Not those 2 days leading up to it. That's what it said. Now, if there's anything wrong in there, talk to TVNZ. I'm just passing it on, and I'm not endorsing it. But if that's the case, then the film sets are perfect, because if you test negative, then you're not infectious as long as you're fully vaccinated, according to that information. According to that information. We've got a few things going on this hour, and remember, if you want to join in with us and you want to pass comments or add something to the show, you always can by sharing. We'll bring George in for a quick second. This is a bit strange. We're live streaming and things run very quickly, so we just want to double check. Good morning, George. Welcome in, sir. Working diligently in the background there. Just because I'm going to check this in real time, have we got a guest coming up at 22?
Half past.
So that's why I'm checking, Jeremy. That's only 5 minutes away. We've got a guest coming up in 5 minutes. Maybe we should just do garbage person of the week then, because that's probably 4 or 5 minutes. I don't know.
Way to kill 5 minutes.
I don't know really what to do with this, but that's what we could do. The conversation we are going to have with is Jeremy, with the artist. You know the name?
Yeah, Sam Sharp. He may be familiar to particularly people in Dunedin. He's an artist. He's an old friend of mine. But he's also, I guess you call it an art installation or just making a stand. He's been a counter protester at certain of the anti-abortion rallies that have been regular outside Dunedin Hospital for quite a long time.
So Sam Sharp coming up in about 5 minutes. Obviously, we're going to be talking about this new law that was passed, I think, yesterday, about a safe zone. I think a safe space. We can call it a safe space because that'll trigger some people to go, oh, safe spaces these days. But an area around abortion clinics that are safe from protesters, for people going into that, for women going in and getting abortions, not to be harangued and harassed. And I'm sure the three of us agree that nobody wants to see those women go through a more difficult time than they have to get that, right? So I'll make that clear from my side of things before we start off. But there are still conversations to be had around freedom of speech and freedom of expression and freedom of protest about that as well. So that conversation will be coming up after 11:30 in a few minutes time. But before we do that, let me just show you guys a post that was on a Dunedin News Facebook page last night. It said simply, local body politician shames girls with big booties. Has he lost the plot? And then there was a link to a local body politician's Facebook page, which ironically now has been taken down. Before we go on, anyone want to guess who that local body politician might be? I've already told you guys, so you guys know. But people who
I know, but yeah.
We're talking about the garbage person of the week, and I thought maybe we could just do a segment which is garbage person of every week. We're talking about Michael Laws, of course, and Michael Laws in the last few weeks has said some horrific things on his Facebook page, especially around his attitudes towards COVID. And I know because I was a Facebook friend of his, and now I'm not. Funnily enough, that just stopped for some reason. I'm not sure why. But he's publicly said his daughter got COVID, so that's out there. So it's not me kind of telling tales after bed or whatever. And he talked about how his daughter had a really mild case, and that's fantastic. I'm excited for his daughter. But at some point in that conversation, he didn't say, yeah, it was only like a bad cold for her. He said, it is just the flu. So he's spreading misinformation and talking bullshit about COVID and about how it's not important, making comments like it doesn't disable and it doesn't kill. Days after that, the mass disability event research coming out, and obviously they're saying in America at the moment that all the people that are dying of Omicron, right? So he was saying Omicron doesn't disable, Omicron doesn't kill. So he's been a garbage person for a very, very, very long time. Now, I didn't get to see this item because it was already disappeared when I got, but here's some responses about it. So these are responses from other people who saw the post. No place for these sexist views in 2022. Disgusting. I've complained and so should everybody else. What makes how, probably that's you, think you've got any right to judge others? How pathetic. Agreed. He's definitely no oil painting. The Central Otago Pino has just gotten you in trouble, Michael. No man can comment like this, especially with your profile, mate. Only saying too much TikTok. It goes on and 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 on, which of course got me intrigued as to what was going on. I put out an active call to see if we could find out what the post was, and no one unfortunately got it. But I was talking to someone and I asked them who saw it. The original poster of that asked him to describe what the post was, and this is what he said. The original post said, this is what the original poster to the Michael Laws post said. He said that Michael Laws started with, why are girls with lovely faces, breasts, etc., like was seen on the post he put up there, obviously, included things like girls that work out to get big butts. And then he claimed that they are just fat, not attractive. And he said he thinks his legs were better. That's a bit of a retelling from someone who saw it. But then the same person sent me this message as well, which is, I guess, in the same, maybe Michael had a theme going on yesterday about making these comments. When did girls with lovely faces, breasts, but unhealthy bums, legs become sexy? So I don't know if we want to bring up a picture of Michael Laws, comment on how attractive other people are. And, oh, well, there you go. Thanks very much. To me, he kind of looks a little bit like a cooked chicken, that the skin is starting to fall off slightly, but that's just my personal opinion. And I don't know why anyone would think, looking like a pedophile is attractive in this day and age. But, looking like, I'm not accusing him of anything. It's my honest hell belief. And I'm just pretty sick and tired of people, garbage people, thinking they're holier than thou, offering every opinion on other people's things and appearances and the way they are. And I kind of just wanted to remind people what a piece of shit Michael Laws was. It's my show. I can do what I want.
Yeah, I'm just listening. I'm just here listening. I think I can hear the lawsuit being written as we talk.
Yeah, it's my honest hell belief.
That is an astonishing picture.
It is my honest hell belief that Michael Laws is a piece of shit. And I'm happy to stand up in court and explain why, including all the stuff I've just mentioned. And I'm sure once the platform starts and he gets back to having a microphone in front of him, God help us all, I will not only be able to prove that very easily in a court of law, so will anyone who listens to his show. I've already told him I look forward to being the first caller on his new show. Really looking forward to that. Finding 0800 Redneck or whatever the number is going to be. But that's just me.
You have to admit, I mean, he was ahead of the curve. He was a shock jock before they really existed in this country. So, like you say, he's been doing this for a long time, and if he's looking for attention, it's working.
We were talking about broadcasting the other day, and we were talking about the AM show, and comments were made that there is a presenter on the AM show who kind of is contrarian on purpose. And my response was, that's the worst kind of broadcaster because they're not authentic. The flip side to that is the incredible sadness and disgust I feel when you're not a contrarian like Michael Laws. You actually believe what you're saying. That seems to me to be even worse. But then again, just my honest hell belief.
Yeah. Hey, sorry, go ahead.
You go.
Oh, no. I was just going to say it's been one of the things that's sort of been interesting is watching. I was reading an article yesterday about Russell Brand, UK comedian who described beautifully, not by me. Someone described him the other day as he's basically just Joe Rogan dressed up as Jack Sparrow at a wellness retreat these days. I've never been a huge fan of him, but there's someone who's gone from, and Joe Rogan the same, simply being a stand-up comedian, and then in Brand's case, an actor, and now sort of billing himself as the voice of this silent majority, the unwoke majority who are out there. And it's amazing how easy it is to do. Back in the day, you had to be Howard Stern. You had to have a national platform to do that kind of thing. These days, all you need is a YouTube channel. And believe me, the irony of me saying that on your YouTube channel is not lost on me.
Who was I talking to? I was talking to someone the other day. George, you'll remind me if it was during the show or not. But they were talking about, some product they were making back in the day had. Oh, I know what it was. Oh, no, I did a podcast. Sorry, I did a podcast with Bruce Pilbrow, who's the CEO of the Spirit of Adventure Trust. And he was talking about, he used to be involved with the parenting place, and he said, they had a thing called Attitude, which was teenagers, basically 20-somethings going to schools to talk about sex education. And they had 100,000 schools and students that were, I was going to say that were touched. That might be the wrong word to use when we're talking about 20-somethings talking about sex education to teenagers, but they were reached each year, and they were really proud of it. And he goes, but in this day and age, and he holds up his phone, he goes, that's what you need for 100,000 people to have your message to. And that's kind of what you're saying, Jeremy. It's like, you don't, TikTokers and YouTubers and people and people who are Insta famous, who have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, if not tens of millions of an audience.
Yeah.
They don't need to go out and get in front of all these people. They need to turn their camera on and sit and wait.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, those. I think he meant one of those touring plays they used to take around schools.
Something like that.
There used to be one about drink drive. I mean, they still do those. Actually, I've had a friend of mine's son was doing one which got cut short by the lockdown last year. But unfortunately, the numbers that those, which I believe actually are very useful and certainly well-meaning initiatives, the numbers of kids or people that they reach, compared to the numbers of people that a TikTok account will reach, are infinitesimal.
Yeah.
And, there's good and bad things for that. I mean, you look at the news that is managing to come out of Ukraine, and so much of that probably wouldn't be coming out if it wasn't for the existence of social media. But the flip side of that is the other side. Both sides of the fence have have equal opportunity to have a loud voice, and with very little fact checking on them. I mean, it's we've just seen that the last 3 years in particular, but it's been going on a lot longer than that.
Yeah. I guess the thing is, it's very easy now to get the message into the person's sphere, because their sphere is in their pocket.
And it's also very easy if you have a sort of left field opinion. I mean, if you are a conspiracy theorist or a anti-vaxxer or believe in chemtrails or whatever, you can find your family, you can find your tribe, you can find the other people who are out there. I mean, I think that there's a reason we've seen a weird resurgence in the flat Earth movement in the last decade. I mean, those people used to be fringe dwellers who might turn up as a weird character on a sitcom. But now, they have their own groups, they have their own channels. And in some ways, great, people aren't as lonely anymore. But in other ways, I mean, as we've seen so clearly here over the last 6 months with the Wellington protests, that can just snowball into something dangerous.
I've had a couple of flat earthers on my podcast, and I think when I had one, it was during lockdown, so 2 years ago probably. I think the biggest flat earth Facebook group in the world had about 250,000 members.
Yeah.
So if you think about 250,000 people out of 7 billion, they're never going to connect. Like if you don't have some way of doing it digitally. But if you think of, so that's 2 per town, across the Western world.
Sure.
So yeah. Now I think it's time to move on to our next conversation. It looks like Sam's struggling to connect with us.
Yeah. Sam is struggling because he's on his phone today, unfortunately. But I think we'll give it a go.
Yep.
And we can always try and get him on another time.
All right. So, well, why don't we bring Sam on first? And we'll just talk about, I'll bring up the story that we were going to talk about. There was a law passed yesterday, I'm going to say.
You got us.
There he is.
You got us, Sam.
Hey, Sam.
We might have Sam, we'll see, but let's just set up what we're actually going to talk about as well.
Okay.
There was a law passed yesterday, late last night, 8:30. The story was put up on TVNZ. Safe zones can now be established around specific abortion facilities, restricting protest behaviour in those areas after a proposed law passed its third reading in Parliament on Wednesday evening. The bill passed 108 votes in favour and 12 against. For Labour, 68 voted in favour, 3 against. For National, 24 were in favour, 9 against. It's still strange to see only 33 National MPs, but I'm sure that's going to change next year. All of the MPs for Green Party, ACT, and Te Pāti Māori voted for the bill. Conscious voting meant MPs didn't have to align their party's votes. The members' bill by Labour's Louisa Wall allowed for the creation of safe areas of up to 150 metres around certain abortion facilities on a case-by-case basis if they requested it. Once enforced, the bill will prohibit the obstruction of people, including advising them to refrain from seeking or providing abortion services within the safe zone. So protesters have to stay outside to do that. In the safe area, people will also be banned from filming those groups if it was likely to cause emotional distress. Now, this is poorly written, but what we're assuming that means is if you're a protest, you can't film inside that 150-meter zone.
Yeah. Just quickly,
the only distress that you're going to cause is going to be to the people getting the abortion.
Yeah, the bill itself says make a visual recording of another person in a safe area in a manner that is likely to cause emotional distress to a person accessing, providing, or assisting with providing abortion services.
As well as also protesting the abortion inside that safe area. Doing so could see someone fined up to $1,000. Anti-abortion protests will continue to be legal outside the safe zones. So we thought we'd have a chat about that. And Jeremy, you suggested having a chat with Sam Sharp. Actually, I'll bring up that photo while we start to have a chat with Sam. Jeremy, in fact, why don't you jump into it, Jeremy, and have a chat with Sam?
Yeah, sure. So, firstly, hi, Sam. Hope you can hear me. For those of you who don't know, Sam's been...
Can you it's pretty crappy up the end.
That's all right. Can we hear you a little bit?
I don't think we're gonna be able to use Sam. I mean, we'll try one more time. Sam, are you able to connect with us?
Yeah. Give it a whirl. I think my Wi-Fi might be pretty slow.
Yeah, I think with respect to Sam and stuff, we could. I just get the feeling. Sam's jumped on and jumped off 4 or 5 times. I get the feeling we're just going to have an impossible conversation there. But
it's a shame.
Yeah, it is a shame. Maybe we'll
figure out a chat with him tomorrow, or So I'll leave the background. I'll leave that photo with you. But let's talk about this law because I think, before we went live today, we both raised an interesting point. Is I also completely support this law. I think it should have happened a long time ago, and I commend the MPs who voted for it for passing it. I don't think it interferes with the right to protest. I mean, there's certainly nothing in this. In fact, it says quite clearly in that article, if not in the law itself, that this is not banning anti-abortion protest. It's just creating a safe zone outside clinics and hospitals that provide these services so that people seeking these services who are already, realistically going through one of the hardest things in their lives, they're not facing further distress simply walking into the building. I understand there might be some concern. It's really interesting to me, actually, that all members of the ACT Party voted for this, because in some ways you could see the libertarian argument that this might be a restriction on free speech, but I don't believe it is. I think the law is careful in the same way that it's not a restriction on free speech. It's that yelling fire in a crowded theatre thing, Free speech does kind of come to the end of its legal existence when you're putting other people in danger, and whether that be physical danger or emotional danger. And you can argue in this case it's both.
I'm in the same camp with you about protecting women going to get an abortion. I do have concerns about the precedents that this legislation is setting. Once legislation is in place and once it works and once laws have been passed, they can be cited as precedents to put similar or same laws in other areas. So my concern is, let's say we've just had the, munters at Parliament grounds doing what they've been doing. What's to say now we can't use this precedence in this law to say 150-meter safe zone from the front door of Parliament? MPs have to be safe, workers have to be safe. We're not stopping protest of Parliament, So just within 150 meters of the door, we're going to do it for the safety of others. It's a strange one with me, and I find myself sometimes conflicted when I completely support and agree with the reason behind the decision, but I know that the decision, given a slippery slope argument, which I don't normally adhere to, I'm not a slippery sloper, could go elsewhere. So I'm like, when I read that they couldn't film inside the 150 meter safe zone, I thought that's really interesting. I mean, what could that mean when it came to, say, for example, the anti-pro? Look, I'm gonna do that whole thing about picking out some things that people might just say that's so oblique, it's ridiculous. But driving their car through with their dash cam on whilst people are protesting on purpose to catch people within that 150 mile who are going into the thing. I am one of the laws, and George, you made a very good point about this, and I'm happy to semi concede this, but when I read any law, and I'll bring it back up again, that is passed in part around emotions. So one of the laws that passed is about if it's causing emotional distress, then I feel like straight away you've got a variant that someone needs to, that is hard to get a metric for. Like if passing a law for me to upset you, anything I do could upset you. Now I know that's not quite the same with this, so it does give me cause to pause and go, where else could this go? Now, it's hard to say that because people are going to hear that and go, it's all about the women and their protection. And I actually agree with that. But I guess I'm trying to at least take one step back and go, what does this mean in a wider aspect as well? And it reminded me this morning, not to be too dramatic, about the First They Came poem. The First They Came poem is that one that talks about, oh, here it is up here. First they came for the socialists. I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists. I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews. I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to come for me. And I just think, I always think about this when we're passing legislation of, I kind of go, cool, let's protect the women, fuck the protesters. That's actually what I think about their positions, their actual arguments. But then I think next time, what if it's the thing I want to fight for, and they're using these laws to come for me, so to speak? Or come for something I want to support.
I guess my argument here, Pat, is that I don't think they're coming for the protesters on this. They're not saying you can't protest. They're just moving them back a little bit. And 150 meters, think about that. It's not actually very far. I mean, you can. It's certainly within shouting distance. 150 meters from the front steps of Parliament is probably about where the Wellington protesters were, if you take into account the Parliament steps. So yeah, this isn't. As far as I'm concerned, I think it would be really hard and legally very dubious to try and use this law as precedent to clamp down on any other form of protest, because it's not clamping. Because it's not. Yeah, I totally appreciate your point. I'm giving you my counterpoint. Is I think if they had said, it would be a totally different law if they'd said you cannot protest at all outside an abortion clinic. You can still protest. 150 meters is essentially across the road.
Let me just say on that point, and I don't want to be the fucking person seen to be standing up for anti-abortion protesters and their message. No. But most houses are about 30 meters across their front yard. Like that's about what a house is from property edge to property edge. 100, and if this was an abortion clinic in a neighborhood, that's 5 houses away. And I'm not saying that's fine. I'm saying literally that's for a protest. You're now 5 houses. Forget the abortion. Let's just call it protest, because I actually support women's right to choose, and I'm not down with the protest, and I don't want to support their message. But now if I just think about a protest for something I do want to support, and I'm now 5 houses away or 5 buildings away or whatever it is, that is a long way away. And then what you're going to have to do is have amplified voices, and then you're going to break noise ordinance, and then there's going to be another thing to be able to shut that down. It's very difficult because I'm not in favor. I don't want to support.
I totally understand. I understand your dilemma.
But I am also someone who goes, what happened? Like, let me put it this. I said this to George before. I used to talk on ZB a lot about minorities. Ironically, I used to do talkback, and I used to call it 3M talkback. Muslims, Maoris, and migrants. You put any of those out there, your lines light up all night long. but we're all minorities in something. And I used to say to these rednecks that would phone me, and do you own a dog? And if they say yes, I say, okay, so you're a minority. So what if we bring in laws that are really, 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 controlling for dog owners? Then actually you're going to be the person who gets affected by that. And I'm going to want to be able to support you and go, you've got a right to do X, Y, Z about this. And so it's really not about this for me is really not about the abortion clinic protest. Sure. It's about the restriction on protesters, ending the sentence here and talking about what the protest is. I guess that's what I'm looking at.
Should we bring Sam back in because he's changed devices?
Let's try that again. Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, right.
Because again, I mean, this is. Hey, there we are. How are you, Sam?
Is that better?
Yeah,
that is better. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Sam, while you've been sorting your tech, we've been talking about this new law that's passed. Just to give people watching a bit of background. I mean, this has been a regular. How long have you been? Can we bring that photo up at all?
Yeah,
This is something Sam's been doing for quite a long time. There's been people protesting abortion clinics at Dunedin Hospital every Friday for quite a long time, and this has been Sam's sort of silent counter protest, which I think is hilarious. But also, I mean, in a way, I mean, you've been doing this for a long time. How effective do you think this new law is going to be to stop or to clamp down on this kind of protest?
I thought they'd already been moved on 150 meters from, because these guys are at the entrance to the Dunedin Hospital. They used to be at the entrance to the abortion clinic.
Right.
So they would be moved on in the past, but they're still right at the entrance where a lot of these women walk past to go into the hospital. I think the abortion clinic has pamphlets saying that there's another route you can go around the back way to avoid these people, but a lot of people either come out that way, or maybe it's the day before or the week before. These people are there every Friday when the abortions happen. So they're all Catholics, these guys. Yeah. So they're very, very religious. They have rosary beads out. They're praying. So I've been doing it on and off for 8 years now, and sometimes people join me. Sometimes I think in the third year there was a whole bunch of women coming along that would stand in front of them, facing them with counter-production signs, but that kind of seemed to gather more people stopping and saying, what's going on here? There's this huge group of people. And then arguments would break out, and it would get pretty full on. But it seems to me they've been moved on from one spot, but I'll give them this. They're very determined, rain, sleet, COVID, nothing's the threat of abuse, they get a lot of people screech on the brakes, get out of the car and start giving them shit. It's pretty amazing to watch, but it doesn't seem to have hurt their resolve at all. And
it's their calling. I mean, I grew up in the Catholic Church. It's their calling. I used to have teachers when I went to Catholic high school that wouldn't be there on a Monday because they got arrested at an anti-abortion. So it's absolutely their deep held belief in their calling as to what there are. I've just thought of something, and I think this might actually unpack what I'm trying to figure out. And I'm trying to figure this out, guys. So one of the things I love about what we do is we all get a chance to talk and figure stuff out. What it probably means, Sam, is that you, as someone who is supporting the women and you're a counter protester, you would be allowed inside the 150 meter zone and they would have to be outside. So if I can just ask this question of all of you, George, you included, pick a protest that you would be supportive of or that you would be against, whatever that is, whatever that thing is for you, that you would be against. And you want to support. Donald Trump was coming to town and you wanted to, you wanted to protest against that. You're outside 150 meter zone, unable to do that protest, and all the pro-Trump ones are allowed inside the 150 meter zone, making all noise and positive things for the one they're trying to support. This is now I'm kind of going, would that be cool? Would we be okay with that? Because that's sort of what we're agreeing to with this. Anybody?
Well, I was going to say that's possibly a bad example, Pat, because I'm not sure if you've ever seen the security entourage for someone like a US president, but that's exactly what does happen. Is all of their supporters are actually in the room with the guy.
Just pick your issue, whatever it is that you want to vote against. So you're outside the 150, but then everyone who supports it is inside the 150, making noise as well. All I'm asking is, are we okay with that? Because that's the precedence we're setting.
Well, I'd break the rule, right? If they were allowed there. So I'm thinking of when I lived in Wellington on Labour weekend, the National Front used to come and protest at Parliament, and we would go there and counter protest, and it often led to violence, and purposely so. We would, I was sort of a young punk who didn't mind getting into scraps and that sort of thing, and we would purposely fight with them and basically chase them back to the train station so they could go back up to the hut, where they would all come from, and it was successful, right? It was there was a dilemma in that we sometimes thought, is our counter protest simply sort of encouraging them to come into town to do the protest in the first place? But we were successful in stopping them from doing their Labour weekend protests. Now, if there was some sort of rule that said that they needed their safe space to do that protest, we would simply break the rule, right? In terms of civil disobedience and protest, this is a big part of protest.
So that should be your expectation of this rule. So the law kind of becomes null and void. That the anti-abortion protesters will just break the rule and get inside the 150-meter zone.
Well, I'm not saying they should, no, but
I'm saying that should be the expectation.
People break laws. Yeah.
Sam, what's your experience on that, Sam? I mean, you were saying these people are determined, but I mean, do you think they're determined enough? Do you think this law will make a difference? I mean, there's $1,000 fine now, according to this law, potentially for being inside that 150-meter zone.
So when does this law take effect?
Well, it was passed last night. I'm not sure actually whether it's in effect immediately, but it certainly has become law. Yeah.
Because I'm just wondering if, I know that these people have been moved on in the past from the entrance to the abortion clinic to where they are now, which apparently is 150 meters. So whether or not and they've been doing that for the past 7 or 8 years. So now they were there last Friday. It's every Friday that they're there. And I work part-time in the hospital myself. So I just have to pop out from the little cafe, pick up my unfoldable sign and stand there. And For years, I never got any threats myself, but lately, probably in the last few months that I've been doing it, there have been a few guys come up to me, men, not women, young Tongan or island men who are very religious. One guy came up and said, if my mum was standing there with the sign and you had a dick sign, I'd punch you in the face. I had to bite my tongue from saying, if your mum was standing here, she'd be a dick. So I did feel very threatened, and I think they enjoyed it, but these other guys who usually cop the abuse, they sort of sat there watching me, sort of waiting for me to get punched in the face. But I don't know. It's just, I don't know what's going to happen with these guys, because if they're away from the hospital, then they're standing on the side of the road somewhere that has no relevance to them. To me, it seems for them, the church is the place that maybe they talk about these things with their groups. I'm not sure. And if I wanted to go into their church and disagree with them, then maybe I'd be kicked out of there. So that's their sort of zone. So I don't know. It's this weird kind of, I know what you mean. If you start banning protests in some degree, then where does the line get drawn? I think
the example you're just giving about going into their church is fair. You get kicked out, but it hasn't been a law that's passed through Parliament, and you wouldn't get $1,000 fine or a criminal record. And again, I'm going to make this really, really clear. I don't want to stand up for these people's views and that, but I just want to think about what this means from a logistical, not even logistical, but legal standpoint.
Let's share this comment because this is relevant as well. You guys can continue. I just wanted to share that while it's there.
Go, Jeremy.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I think Sam's brought up a good point, and we read about this when we were reading out the law, is that this isn't a blanket ban. The clinics and hospitals have to request it, and in some ways, it sounds like Dunedin may have already done that a few years ago, and it sounds like this specific group of protesters have abided by that. I think there is, this is possibly, and Sam, your experience, if I'm right, you were saying it's essentially been a pretty quiet protest from the protesters' point of view. I mean, they haven't been massively vocal. They've basically been doing what you've been doing, right? Standing there holding signs.
Sure. They the only sort of noise they make is the praying with the rosemary beads and talking to each other. Sometimes there are women there. There are 2 older women that join them. but mostly it's really old, decrepit men. One's called Des. He's always got a dripping, snotty nose. And the amount of women that come up and say, fuck, what the fuck have you got the right over my uterus? The disgusting old creep. And they just rattle their signs, of which most of their signs are fake pictures of aborted fetuses. Like it's like they've come out like little kids sort of thing. And this idea that we're aborting full-term babies. So, I mean, that their literature is wrong most of the time. But I do enjoy watching people come up to them and start giving them shit. It's very evocative, and it's I mean, the reason I'm there is my great-grandmother died of a backyard abortion in England when abortions were illegal in the 20s and 30s, right up until, I don't know when they made them legal, but basically it's the same in most countries where it's illegal. It goes underground and the procedures are very dangerous. And Nana lost her mother when she was 12, to something that no one talked about. Everyone said it was TB at the time.
Right.
So I think that's a different kettle of fish. But the protest itself, these people have been there for so long. I think they were told to turn their signs around when children were walking past, because they are very graphic. And they do this weird thing where they sort of go, it's almost like people playing soccer on the road. Car, they go, kid, and they all sort of try to turn their signs around. And it's so bizarre. It's like, they're offensive and wrong, but you're still holding them. It's very strange. But I don't know if they were moved on, whether or not I'd go along and stand next to them there, because where are they going? Are they outside the dental school, which is the next school of medicine along from the hospital? Or I know what you mean. This particular thing, watching what happens in the States, where they have they've got a clinic and then somebody's bought the house across the street, and the house across the street pretends to be a clinic, and they get women coming in thinking they're going into the clinic, and then they talk them out of the abortion because they're not the clinic, they're the religious nutters. So that's a
really good example. Let me just throw this out there, because I'm sure all of us would support the idea of buying the house across the street, like the Pride group did in Topeka, Kansas, from the Westboro Baptist Church. The Westboro Baptist Church, someone bought the house across the road from there, and they set it up as a gay pride protest against them. Now, all of us, I'm sure, would support that. But then when I and I'm not a libertarian, but I'm like, hang on, I struggle sometimes to go, if I've got the rights and abilities and freedoms to do X, then does that mean the person who has the opposing view for me should also have those as well? And that's what I'm thinking. All of us, I'm sure, would nod about that and laugh probably about that house across the road from the Westboro Baptist Church being painted in rainbow colors. But then saying, the one buying across from an abortion clinic, not so good. How do we do that and stay consistent and stay fair?
Well, I guess, there are some questions that we haven't answered. One of which being, are pro-abortion protesters, for want of a better word, allowed within the zone? I'm not sure if the law makes that clear or not. I haven't read the entire legislation, obviously. And secondly, this idea that places have to request it. I mean, it sounds to me, and again, I'm spitballing a little bit because I haven't been there. It sounds like to me that perhaps Dunedin Hospital has come to a sort of détente with this particular group of protesters that Sam is counter protesting. That might be very different to a clinic in certain suburbs of Auckland, where the protest might be far more vocal, far more aggressive, and that's where this emotional distress comes in. I mean, that's entirely possible. That's why this clause is in the law, is that, right, maybe you've got a group of quiet protesters, and if Dunedin Hospital can live with it, then so be it. But if you do have this potential for aggression or the emotional distress, then this law allows places to put something in place to put that in.
Yeah, I wonder if there was a specific incident that took place with visual recording, right? It's interesting that they have that in there. I wonder if someone's privacy was...
Well, I think there have been numerous cases where people have filmed women going into clinics, and actually doctors, particularly in the US and in Australia, there have been doctors who, in the US, there have been doctors who have been killed over this because they were identified. We haven't got to that point, as far as I know. I'm certainly, no expert on this. So maybe, yeah, perhaps that is a preemptive point rather than responding to a particular incident. I don't know.
Yeah, and look, I want to say again that I'm not supporting the abortion message, but I guess straight away I think about, let's say you are an activist and you were against big oil, and you wanted to protest big oil, but you were stopped from filming the big oil executive going into the building. Most of us would probably say that's not appropriate. So I guess I'm just asking, where is the line?
And yeah, this happened in America with, I remember the Department of Homeland Security secretary getting protested in a restaurant, and there was this whole debate about people in power being held accountable in their day-to-day lives and in public. Yeah. I feel more sort of like wary of the discourse that could be sort of reproduced after the Wellington and Parliament grounds protests. I know this is a law and therefore, is a bit more serious, but I can just totally imagine the sort of discourse that we heard from Jacinda and other politicians, that sort of really hardcore law and order. These people are the sort of dispossessed of society, and therefore so and so, they shouldn't be allowed to have this space to protest. And I know there's other sort of parts to this, but that's where I'm a bit of a slippery slope sort of idiot, is when it comes to that sort of thing. I could just imagine it's almost, it seems inevitable in a way that is going to be evoked one day as an excuse to sort of degrade a protest movement in Wellington, or put in a bunch of cameras and make it into this high-tech, closed-off area like the White House where people can't get to.
I think it's a shame that we might lose that access to the we've got the best access to our parliament in the world, and our leaders. I mean, you can walk up to Jacinda in the street. Not so much now; she's getting threats, and there's a lot more security. But the last time she was in Dunedin, you could walk up and say hi and hold the baby, see if you can spot Clark in the background somewhere. But now things have changed dramatically, and I think that's kind of sad that it's almost like we've lost a little bit of our innocence. Yeah. That was just after Clark had done his wee bike ride as well, so it's interesting that he's in the background there. Somebody photoshopped him out for me as well, which I thought was quite interesting. But her security on this day, when I ran across the road yelling Jacinda with the T-shirt on, and a policeman tried to stop me, and then he recognised me as being the guy that had the plastic gun stolen from his garage one time, and he was the officer that fingerprinted my house. So he kind of let me go, and then his security tried to stop me, and she said, "Oh no, that's just Sam. He's okay." So, but it's that weird thing where I've walked up the steps of Parliament, and I would have been maybe 19 or 20. I did a brown eye and took a photo, and I was really happy. And when I was in England, I went to do the same thing at Buckingham Palace, and my friend said, "Do not get your ass out here, you'll get dragged off by the police." So, and I was kind of like, "Hey, what's the story with it? Why can't you get your bum out here?" But their security was a bit more intense than ours. So
I think the comment you put up before, George, which you never actually spoke to, M. Prevailed, talking about this is the beginning of limitations of our freedom of speech approach. Look at each piece of legislation and its intent. If the next bill goes too far, there are processes to stop it. I agree with that, and I think I generally trust our system. Generally, I actually maybe not, but I'm because I want to support the women who are going in. This feels like it's okay to me, and then my personal conflict goes, but what if it was my thing I was arguing about? I wouldn't be okay with this. So, but yeah, I think that's fair. We look at this and we say, do we support it or not for this? And then when the next one comes out, what do we do? And hopefully, or I guess my concern about that is that whole, once something has precedence, it's much easier to apply to something else, especially if they can cite how it's working and doing the job it's entitled and supposed to be doing. So,
when it comes to fines and things like that, church groups, I'm just wondering if a bit of tithing would take care of that fine, or maybe some fundraiser at the church, because I know that's how Destiny Church quite often pay their fines. Brian Tamaki doesn't seem to come out of his money, so
well, there's another whole conversation around churches should be paying taxes, and I'm fully on board with that one. Fucking start paying church taxes, please, churches. Sanitarium with their $300-400 million income a year, not paying any income tax on it. Hey, we've basically come to the end of the show. George has messaged me saying, should we talk about St. Patrick's Day? We're going to talk about St. Patrick's Day and cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation, but we've actually got on Dr. Maktes Atamandi tomorrow as our co-host. And she has a doctorate in racism, so maybe we will put off the conversation.
I will cede my time to the honourable next host.
So maybe I was like four white guys talking about racism is always such a
no. We're talking about racism. We're talking about Irishness.
No, Pat's not white. He's Irish.
Yeah, I'm not white. I'm Irish. Yeah. I love that line. I'm going to use that. No, I'm not white. I'm Irish.
Yeah, Maktes will love that.
So we will put that off till tomorrow. And I'm sorry that if you've tuned in especially to see us talking about cultural appropriation, you sad bastards. We will come back to it tomorrow. So join us tomorrow for that. But this has been a really interesting conversation. One of the things I love about what we do is giving a platform for a news event to talk into a conversation around issues. And I feel like even though we've all kind of said different things in this, we probably sort of all on some level agree about this being an okay thing. But if it was applied somewhere else, maybe we wouldn't be quite so happy about it. Maybe. I don't know. I don't want to speak for you guys, but
I think it's a wait and see approach.
Yeah, it's a wait and see approach. All right, cool. And if there's nothing else, hey Sam, thanks for joining us.
Hey, no, thank you. Sorry, it took me a while to get on there, but we got there in the end.
It's not unusual on this show. Don't worry.
And the 30-year-old Mac is still working.
I've never met you personally, Sam, but next time I'm going past the hospital and I'm seeing you with your dick sign out, I'll come say good day.
Actually, Paula Penfold made a documentary about her experience with abortion, and I was part of that. I'll see if I can send you the link because it is quite interesting. She talked to them, trying to get a balanced interview, and they were a bit cagey, but they put their point across as well. But very interesting.
Good time for a plug. Paula Penfold coming up on the podcast next week talking about their latest Stuff Circuitry documentary. She's been on twice before, so she's going to be up with us.
Give her my regards. She's an awesome woman.
I will, Sam. Thanks for joining us today. Really do appreciate it. George, thanks for your work today. As always, the brains and the looks behind the show. George Elliott there sitting up in the background. Appreciate you doing that. And Jeremy, mate, again, it was a different one again today, but always enjoy spending time with you and hanging out and chatting over these news stories of the day. And when we see you next time, we'll see you next time. And for everybody else, I guess we will catch you guys tomorrow morning from 11 o'clock.
Good luck with your rat.
Oh, well, actually, I just got a message from another housemate, literally just now. Shall I tell you what it is? Or shall I leave it for tomorrow? This could be the big cliffhanger.
Leave the cliffhanger.
A message just came through. I just did my day 3 test with a negative result.
Okay.
So I've already said my expectation is we'll probably be okay because we followed the science of what to do when we thought we might come into contact with it. Of course, that could blow up to bite me in the face in about 10 minutes when I take my rat test. But my expectation is tomorrow I will be clear. If I'm not, I'm not. But everyone will have to just come back and tune in again to find out the continuation of a story. What was that? That was a sitcom called Soap or something. Anyway,
I can't remember that one. Yeah.
Jeremy, thank you, mate. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Pat. No problem.
And we'll talk to you next time. Everybody else, we'll see you tomorrow morning from 11. Hooroo!